Good evening and welcome to the Winthrop Public Schools School Committee meeting on December 18th, 2017 at 6 p.m. in the Harvey Hearing Room. Ms. Hames, would you please call the roll?
Mr. Vecchia?
Present.
Mr. Capabianco?
Present.
Mr. Holden?
Yes.
Mr. Sanford? Mr. Perrin?
Yes.
Ms. Sullivan?
Here. This meeting will be recorded and televised at a later date. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Up first tonight, we have citations for school committee service. We have several members of previous school committees in our audience tonight. Thank you so much for coming. You want me to go ahead and read the first one?
Sure. Are you going to read the second? Thank you.
So we have Mr. Bill Holden. A resolution whereas William Holden has served with distinction as a member of the Winthrop School Committee, and whereas William Holden has been a devoted and loyal friend and colleague to the Winthrop Public Schools, and whereas William Holden has had a strong positive impact on scores of Winthrop students through his display of genuine concern for young people, therefore be it resolved that the school committee of the town of Winthrop extends its sincerest gratitude and offer our best wishes for his future endeavors, and therefore be it voted and made part of the official minutes of the Winthrop School Committee. I'll make a motion to accept this citation. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Vecchia. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Holden, I just want to say it's been a pleasure serving with you. You've had many great points in meetings that I've appreciated, and your experience and history with the school district has been an asset. Thank you.
Thank you. It's been 12 and a half years. And it's been a great time, contentious time. I met a lot of wonderful people, but was always with the kids and staff in mind in the district. Met a lot of friends, Gus, Mary Lou, Pat Milano, Mike Goldberg, and Gary Scomro. Just so many people I've served with, and superintendents included. It's been a wonderful time, and a lot of great accomplishments we were able to get through. Full day K was one of the best, and I'm looking over to my right and saying to Miss Pearson, like in mid-August we said full day K starting in September, and she did it, and it's been wonderful. But there's a lot of other great things we did in the district that moved it forward. So thank you, everyone.
All in favor say aye. Aye. Thank you.
Next up, Mr. Perrin.
I have a resolution for Don Sullivan, our chairman, and I'd like to read it, and then I'll ask for a motion. A resolution. Don Sullivan has served with distinction as a member of the Winthrop School Committee, and Don Sullivan has been a devoted and loyal friend and colleague of the Winthrop Public Schools, and Don Sullivan has a strong, positive impact on scores of Winthrop students through her display of genuine concern for young people. Therefore, be it that the school committee of the town of Winthrop extend its sincerest gratitude and offer our best wishes for our future endeavors, and therefore be it, and made part of the official minutes of the Winthrop School Committee. Can we get a motion for this?
So moved.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Congratulations, Don.
Thank you. I have truly loved being on the Winthrop School Committee, and I appreciate the support of the community and my school committee members and my past superintendent and my current superintendent. Thank you so much.
I must say it's been a pleasure to work with both Dawn and Bill. I've known Bill for 37 years, so those of you who do not know that we've known each other in terms of somebody who sort of sticks around with kids, I think it was either 6th or 7th grade, you were my CCD teacher, along with your wife, and that's a long time ago. But at that time, being a young guy and working with kids, and then taking on basketball and all the other coaching activities that he's taken on, and staying on as a school committee member, and both of you serving on the committee. We're tasked with filling the seats of two, very strong members. School committee is not a paid position in terms of bringing in a heavy income, and it's a lot of hours and it's a lot of time. And it's probably one of the most important volunteer seats that I can see. 7 people making decisions for 2,000 children and holding in their hands the job of the superintendent, because your job is to hire and let go if need be a superintendent, to approve the budget, millions of dollars, 28 plus $1 million a year, align that with what's important for students, stay up on all of the state laws and the mandates and what students need, to be mindful of what you're voting on, and then equally as important, the policy. Developing policy, amending policy, and staying in touch with education in 2017, which is a moving target. So I applaud you for all of the years, whether it's short-term or long-term. It's a very important position, and I look forward to new people, and hope they've been watching the people that have been here, because we've had a pretty solid crew for a while. So congratulations. And thank you for
Lisa.
working with me.
I just want to thank you both for your service. It's been a pleasure working with both of you, both very hard workers, and a lot of effort on your end. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Maybe take public comment, though?
If I may,
Oh, sure.
I just want to both thank you for your service. But Mr. Holden, you're one of the first people I met when I moved to this town. Growing up with Mike, as you know, we've been best friends since we were probably 14. And I just want to thank you for all you've done, not only as a school committee member, but as a police officer. And the whole town is lucky to have you. But you're not going anywhere. I'm going to nominate you for one of the vacant seats. Kidding.
I think when Tina was 16, he came up to me, he goes, I think we're running for school committee. Seriously, and I said, why don't you give it a few years, get through college, a little thicker skin,
Yeah.
and he did, he's here.
Ms. Griffin.
I'd like to echo also and wish the very best to Don and Bill for their service to the community. It's sometimes it's a thankless job when you hit the rough roads of controversy, but in the end, you always have done what is best for the school children of Winthrop. So thank you for all your sacrifices and service to the community.
Thanks, Ron.
Thank you, Ms. Becker.
Maybe public comment out in case anyone in the audience, I don't know.
We can take public comment out of order if anybody. Mr. Mazzaro?
Thank you. I just wanted to say thank you to Bill, thank you to Don. I had the privilege of serving with Bill as a school committee member as well for 4 years, and most of our committees here tonight. I always look back at that committee as a special committee because I thought we laid down a lot of groundwork. But over the past 4 years and 6 years, the work that you both have done on this committee, be it known to both of you that you've made a difference in a lot of people's lives with the great work that's gone on in Winthrop. And you can always take a look at that school when you drive by and realize that you had a big part of that. And so, congratulations to your service. Thank you for your service, and I appreciate it as a superintendent working with all of you. I know we had our battles at times and we had a lot of good things, but we were always looking at it in the best interest of kids, and that's what made it special. So thank you both.
Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Any other public comment? Okay. Seeing no further public comment, I think at this time we'll take a recess, 5 minutes. Thank you. To tonight, so if we can reconvene.
See ya. Bye, John, thanks. Oh, yes, okay.
This was one game last year.
Oh. Your father's staying, Lisa.
Huh?
He's staying.
And he's sitting behind me. I'm
He
gonna
took
have to
his coat
turn
off.
my chair.
All right.
You gotta wait for the next break.
All right. So.
You can invite me.
Back from our recess, I want to take a moment also to say for Patty Hames and Susan Eccles, like the unsung heroes of the school committee, we could not do our jobs without them doing such awesomeness in their job. So thank you so much, and we don't forget about you. You guys really, help us out every step of the way. So we appreciate you. So. so next we have our principals here for an MCAS presentation. Ms. Howard, would you like to get us started?
Sure, thank you very much. So tonight, we decided to take a little bit of a different tact because we have a little bit of a different test before us now. In October, the first results of the Next Generation MCAS were released in ELA and math in grades 3 through 8. These results are from tests that the students took in the spring of 2017, and they are the new baseline for students, schools, and districts as we move forward to test students in the areas that measure learning differently and focuses in more so on students' readiness for the next grade level. So in preparation for that, as we received our results, we felt as though giving a brief overview of how we did would be helpful, and then going into more depth as needed, but the overview is sort of where we wanted to start. So when you look at the Next Generation MCAS, it's an updated version of a nearly 20-year-old MCAS assessment. So if you think about the last 5 years of time, we've had 3 different MCAS exams in the last 5 years. And now the Next Generation MCAS is before us. So this particular MCAS is focusing in on students' critical thinking, application and knowledge, and their ability to make connections between both reading and writing. It is designed to give a clearer signal of readiness for the next grade level, as well as college and career readiness as our students move forward. It is designed differently than the past, so it's designed to be given on a computer. Some of our students are still taking it paper and pencil, but moving forward, the demand will be that it be all taken on a computer straight through grade 10. And eventually, grade 10, next year, will be taking it as well. So where are we at? So the way we are looking at 2 different, people are, I think, more familiar with comparing advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and warning as the areas that students could be targeted in as they took the test. And the Next Generation MCAS has changed that up a little bit. They have recategorized how you score. So you score not meeting the expectations if you had a score of between 440 and 470, to partially meeting the expectation if you have a 470 to 500. Meeting the expectations, you'd be in the range of 500 to 530, and exceeding the expectations if you were 530 to 560. What we would like to do tonight is, starting with Mr. Herity, talk a little bit about how our students scored first time around on the test. So I'm going to start with Mr. Herity. And I will get you to, you look up here, we have slides. And I'm going to bring you,
Okay, if I kind of.
yeah, it's up to you where you want to
Just
sit.
pull it, do you want to pull a
Just
chair
so
up
I
to
can
this
see.
table?
Okay.
Sit next to Lisa, or?
You look very short with that chair.
I guess so I can see the
You want to be able to see the board? There you go.
Is it okay if I sit
Yeah,
here
sure.
and that way
Yeah.
everybody can kind of see the screen? Okay. So, yeah, you can click to the next slide.
Move on.
So we have a
There you go.
clicker there.
Yep, if you want.
Okay. Yeah, so basically the state recategorized the proficiency levels, and they changed them, so students that were proficient last year may not meet expectations this year. Students that were advanced might be in the met expectations level. We basically have hit the reset button on the test. So what they did is they gave us this exam, and they are taking this exam as our first year benchmark. So from this exam, they're going to create 5-year targets. So it's really a true reset of the accountability system. We didn't get a level this year. We didn't get a school percentile. In the past, we've been able to say, we're a level 2, we're in this percentile. We saw some pretty good percentile gains over the last couple of years, and we said, okay, we're making steady progress and we're making substantial growth, because really it's about growth. Because if you go and you compare ourselves to other schools, there's a lot of differences in resources, demographics, English learner populations, different things like that. So really what you want to focus on is, from year to year, are we seeing substantial gains with student progress? And if we're not, then we need to dig in and say, why are we not seeing those gains? So when we look at it this year, Our third grade students, that's kind of just a brief snapshot there. Third grade, 51% met or exceeded. Fourth grade, 40%, and fifth grade, 39%. What that data doesn't show, though, if you can click back one.
Ask me how to click back one.
Oh, that's okay. But what that data doesn't show is our percentage of students that did not meet expectations. So like you translate it to like the warning category on MCAS was extremely low. So it was about half of the state level. So we have a bubble of kids that are right on the cusp between met expectations and partially met expectations. So a big bubble of kids that probably would have scored proficient last year, but now they're on the partially meeting expectations. So our goal now is to really dig down into our ELA standards and find out, okay, what do we need to do to kind of make those shifts so all of our students are met or exceeded expectations. And what we found when we did that analysis is it's for ELA, it's tied directly to writing. So our students, in the past, the assessment was weighted between 25 and 30% of writing. So that's how they scored it. There was a written response, about 25%. Now it's 40%. So they've shifted the test significantly to be focused on writing. And we know historically that's been an area in Winthrop that has been something that we've struggled with. So our focus over the last couple of years has been to improve our writing and create our own in-house curriculum units targeting writing. So we've kind of already started this work, and so I feel like we're pretty much on the right track there.
Next.
Yeah. So in these, those are the takeaways. It's tied directly to writing. That's really the only area that we didn't score above the state, and is writing. You can keep going.
Keep going.
Yep.
Go
Oh,
on.
wait, no,
Math.
so that's math. So math, 41% in grade 3, 48% in grade 4, and 44% in grade 5. Last year was the first year that grade 3 had seen the guided math model, which is our differentiated instruction model, similar to RTI in reading, where students are broken up into small groups and get more individualized instruction. So we expect to see pretty significant growth in grade 3 this year. Grade 4 and grade 5, we saw pretty big gains, especially with grade 5. Grade 5 has always been an area of weakness for us in regards to math, and this year we saw some pretty good gains there. So those are the takeaways. You have those in front of you. And this slide, I thought, is just a good snapshot. It shows you where we're at. Our average scale score for ELA was a 498. The state is set at a 500. Our average scale score for math is right at 500. And we had 42 students that scored a 498. So if you think about that, 42 students, some minor instructional shifts that we can make, considering this is our first year and we have, fourth grade, first time they took it on the computer. I think next year we're going to see a pretty good bump in our scores, which is good because this is our benchmark year, and so it'll show that we're making progress and growth is what we want.
I mean, you would say 498 is less than one standard deviation away. Is it statistically significant? 498 to 500?
I mean, it depends on you'd have to look at the test, like 2 points could be one question.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're basically one question off, and if you look at writing, the writing has, I think I have to look at it again, but there's, I think, 26 points in writing, or maybe not that many, maybe 18 points in writing. So if we can bump 2 points in our writing, which I think is a piece of cake for us right now where we're headed, I think we're going to see that we're going to make some big
So
gains.
just so I understand the graph,
Yeah.
this is like 500 students, these numbers?
So that's the score. Like that would be like an MCAS at 260, right, or a 240.
I guess how come we had not one student go to exceeding expectations? Shouldn't it have been a thin line maybe to the right? I'm trying to.
No, so that's just a scaled score. So that's like the average.
Okay, so it's an
that's
average.
That's just our average score among all our students.
All right.
That bar graph right there. Yeah.
So it can be
could be broken down much smaller.
I mean, you can have 10 students that far expect needs, but then 30 students that are way below, but, so it's kind of tough to see where,
Well, if that were
I mean,
true, our
yeah.
average wouldn't be right on with the state average.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a one way to look at the data. You know, I'm happy to break it down in more detail, but just a quick snapshot today.
Right, you want the next slide? Or-
Yep. And then I just want to show this slide because these are our school improvement plan goals. So we created these back in June, and this was before we had any MCAS data. And so if you look at our school improvement plan goals, establish consistency with literacy instruction. That was a goal that we already knew that this is a focus area for us. We need to focus on our writing units. We need to focus on aligning our curriculum, which is the Storytown curriculum is a 2008 curriculum that's not aligned to the standards. So we knew that was something we had to take a look at this year, which we've done. And then also our STEM Scopes program, which is our science focus. That's going to be a big shift for us this year as well. So, and this slide just shows a couple changes that we've made this year in response to this data. One is we have unit assessments. I wouldn't say responses data because things we were going to do anyway, but we have unit assessments tied directly to the standards for ELA. So in the past, we had relied on the Storytown assessments as our end of unit chapter tests, and now we've created our own standardized units that we can get a really good gauge on where our students are at as they move across the year. And also we have on-demand writing assessments pre and post for each one of our units. So we can actually monitor our student progress at the beginning of their unit, at the end of their writing unit, to kind of gauge are we seeing the growth we want from our writing, and giving our students opportunities to practice those skills before they go into the MCAS.
So I don't know if you want if you want to refer to the English, the ELA in grade 3 that you were speaking to, how many kids met. So
Yep.
if you look at all students, 151 students, Bill, I have a much more broken down by subgroup, which is the material that the principals use, class by class, student by student, to break the material down. But if you look at the 151 students, 5 of them exceeded the expectation, 46 met the expectation, 44 partially met, and I think you spoke about a handful of those partially meeting students being just so close to being pushed over to met, and not meeting expectation, only 5. And that includes all students combined, students with disabilities, Title I students, the whole gamut. So we gave you sort of an overview, but the work that's going on within the buildings, and has been, because these test results are actually old to us in terms of people in the field. This is, although they came out in October, we're benchmarking kids in so many other ways right along that we're really doing this work way ahead of time. So taking this data and really breaking it down student by student and as deep as question by question to figure out where the next generation MCAS is moving, sort of breaking away from regular MCAS of old with a lot of reading focus. This is much more focused towards writing, and we're aware of that. So aside from waiting till we have this type of presentation to you, this work's been going on since as early as the summer, when we had our boot camp, in which we took data and broke it apart and looked at all kinds of next generation questions and our own scope and sequence, and you can get into that a little bit more if you'd like. But I understand the need to kind of say, oh, how many kids? And we can break that data down even deeper for folks. Any other questions maybe for Mr. Harity at this time? Okay, thank you.
Okay.
So you can't really get to the Cummings School unless you start at the Gorman Fort Banks. So Ms. Pearson, our principal at the Gorman Fort Banks, is certainly not separate from getting our students ready and to take tests, and that moving target of MCAS changing its mind and the state changing its mind on what we're focusing on, and us trying to keep up with them. Ms. Pearson, as we all know, can dance pretty well, so she's going to speak about what happens at the Gorman Fort Banks in preparation for getting our students ready to go to the Arthur T. Cummings.
And I'm going to take the liberty of going to the seat that Mr. Harity is already warmed up.
It's like a hot seat.
The hot seat, right, so a whole bunch of different reasons.
Yeah.
So I think our call to action is a very different one, because for us, it's a matter of sending a student product over to the coming school that's ready to take the introduction of the skills and the foundation that we've laid and bring that to a point of mastery and integration. And those are very, very different things. The information that we use in order to get students there is basically, it's a developmental sequence. We know what the skill sets of students are based on just the physics of what they are. So there are limitations to their physical abilities, there are limitations to their cognitive skills. And so what we have to do is find out what each of those students are bringing to the table, and then figure out how it is we're going to instruct them in a way that's differentiated, but moves them along simultaneously. And that can be difficult. But what we do is we do regular assessments. Just to give you a sense as to what some of those would look like, I'm going to give you an example of just reading, for instance. And in reading, we're talking about students that frankly can't distinguish between letters and numbers. And so we take them to a place of being able to identify what a letter is, help them understand that letters are not just strung together, but they're strung together in a methodical fashion that are separated by spaces that are then called words. And part and parcel of that is teaching students that there are sounds that are associated with these letters. And then once you get these words in place, you have to get to a place of helping them understand that these letters can be switched out. And when the letters are switched out, they're going to make different sounds depending on the letters that they're next to, and so on and so forth. So for us, it's really a matter of establishing a foundation that's solid enough that students can actually take that information and do something with it. Without going into a lot of detail and a big deep dive, I decided what I would do is give you a sense as to what that looks like by showing you what the Dibble scores for just this year's students are, because this is actually real-time information. The Dibble scores are really a composite of other scores, particularly in second grade. So in second grade, we're moving from things that are assessed at the beginning of the year, like whole words read, phonemic awareness, those sorts of things, nonsense word fluency. And we're moving away from those. And by the wintertime, those skills will no longer be assessed, and they will be assessed, different skills will be assessed as part of the progression of student learning. If you think about what Dr. Parker says, and Dr. Parker is the person who is in charge of MCAS, he's the MCAS guru who has helped all of us, at least Mr. Harity and I. You can see that what we've got going on here is probably, it's very impressive. It's among our best years yet. We're looking at he wants 80% in the top 3 categories. And you'll see that the top 3 categories are average, above average, and well above average. Not to be confused with the MCAS grading criteria. We're just on Dibbles right now. So Dr. Parker says a solid foundation means that you have 80% of your students scoring in the top 3 categories, only 20% in the bottom 3 categories. And within that 20% in the bottom, only 10% of the below average and well below average. This is a big gain for us, and I think I actually even, so for instance, last year, we had 65% of our students scoring in the top 3 categories. In 2015, it was 62%. So we are clearly making some advances with our students, which frankly I believe is a credit to the expertise of our staff and to our familiarity with the MCAS criteria, obviously, but more importantly, the level of instruction that's being provided over at the coming school. So I'm here to let you know that I think that we are sending some very solidly prepared students. Next slide, please. That's what happens with regard to reading, but there is another measure, and the other measure is probably the one that's even more important now, and that's the comprehension assessment. The reason why I say it's more important now is because if you take a look at the new standards, because the department didn't just change the way we're assessing students, they actually changed the standards themselves. The standards now basically prohibit you from teaching content exclusively. Everything is integrated. So comprehension is a big deal. If you were to take a look at the new standards, the buzzwords for almost all of them begin with describe and explain. Well, you can't describe and explain something if you don't understand it. So the measure of comprehension is a very big one for us. I wanted to show you what we've been able to accomplish with our students in just 3 months. If you take a look at the, I can find that slide in my own. There we go. I don't know where that slide is in my packet, although I know that I have it. Oh, here we go. If you were to take a look at the total performance of students from September until December, you're going to see that we've moved from 33% of our students scoring advanced or proficient in reading comprehension to 50%. Now, I think this is probably also attributable to our writing curriculum, because the writing curriculum is also emphasizing a whole bunch of things that students are putting into place with their comprehension. We think about author's purpose, we think about style, we think about associated vocabulary, and all of those things are also critical to comprehension. So if this trajectory were to continue, and we have every reason to believe that it's going to, I think I'm going to be sending Mr. Harity over a very high-performing class this particular time around. When you take a look at the oral reading fluency, which I showed you in the Dibble slide, and you take a look at the comprehension, you braid those two skills together, that's the highest that you can go in the reading chain. When you think about the levels of reading acquisition, our second grade students are looking pretty good. Next slide, please. So here's an example of what we do for assessments in math. This particular slide is showing you what Mrs. Sullivan does for us. Mrs. Sullivan takes our chapter assessments. She takes them all by grade level, and she logs in the student answers. Student answers are then tied into the strands, the strands that we know are also associated with the standards. And so that's how we focus our instruction. The point that Mr. Harity drew to your attention, where we have a little bit more to do in math, because we didn't close that chasm between the district's performance and the state's performance as well in math as we did in ELA. And I think, although I don't know this, but I have a feeling that in large measure that can be partly attributable to the fact that we do not have an RTI model like Mr. Harity does over at the Cummings School. The only additional shot in the arm we give students is very limited small group instruction that's facilitated by 2 retired teachers, Ms. McKenna in first grade and Ms. Polo in second grade, both of whom are very familiar with the Go Math curriculum and also the standards. Unfortunately, they join our staff for just a few hours a week for budgetary reasons, and we have no way to facilitate an RTI model at the present time. And so I do think that it's costing us in some ways, because as I've told this committee and other committees previously, math is tough. Math is not one of those concrete areas. It goes from concrete to conceptual. And so that makes the instruction at that particular level very challenging. But nevertheless, this is an example of how we're assessing our students. I understand that 10 marks is a popular and very well utilized tool that's done some great things over at the Cummings School. I would let you know that 10 marks is not appropriate for second grade, and it's not by my teacher's estimation or my estimation. If you were to look at the research that just came out this past summer on 10 marks, it doesn't even begin to quantify the work that's being done with student achievement until third grade. And I think part of the reason that we struggle with assessments, and it's not just our school, but in general, why assessments are not as easily to acquire in students that are younger than third grade, is for the reason that I began this presentation with, and that is that the foundation of skills has yet to be established. The final thing that I would just want to bring to your attention, and there isn't a slide that speaks to it, has to do with our writing curriculum. The writing curriculum has become far more robust recently than it has in the past. We developed a writing curriculum that is only in its second year of being rolled out. The students are being instructed to describe detail. They are being instructed to pay very careful attention to the word choice, to make sure that the grammatical markers are appropriate, that the mechanics of their writing, all of these sorts of things are being hyper-focused. To Mrs. Howard's point, and to Mr. Harity's point as well, this is a moving target. Not only have the approaches to assessing students changed radically over the course of 5 years, the content of the focus of instruction has changed as well. We had some great work that was done this summer at the curriculum boot camp, and it's only scratching the surface, because where we need to go from there is to expand that work. I was talking to Mr. Harity just informally, and these new standards, they're deep. They're very, very challenging. And so my concern about going forward with advancing student performance in Winthrop is to make sure that our teachers are familiar with the curriculum maps that we worked on this summer, specifically the scope and sequence, and that they understand that the new standards actually reference other content. You can no longer teach math exclusively without touching upon ELA in some fashion or science in some fashion. And so they're all kind of coming full circle. The call to action is for depth and rigor. We're trying to adjust our curriculum to reflect that. We're trying to adjust our instructional approaches, and the teachers are absolutely tireless. In a different presentation, perhaps at another time, I'd be able to show you what their professional practice goals are and their student learning goals, because really, that's where the rubber meets the road. It's the focus of the instruction that's going to kind of raise all boats here. That's it.
Thank you. very
Just one
much.
question.
Go right ahead.
Yes, Mr. Lee.
Ms. Pearson, would class size the last year or two, did it have a negative effect or not a helpful effect on scores? I'm just, class size is appropriate, too high, too low?
Well, so they haven't really deviated that much in first and second grade, and those are the years that are probably introducing more focused instruction for the things that are being measured in MCAS. This, thankfully, and regrettably at the same time, is the first year that we're struggling with class size in kindergarten. It's a beast. It really is. And am I concerned about the solidity of the foundation of students coming into first grade? Absolutely. Anybody would be. So class size always plays a role in it. And if you're not sure the class size does, look at the impact that RTI has. Isn't that a tiny little microcosm of what class size looks like? When you're giving students more opportunity to respond and practice in repetition, that can only be accomplished with smaller class sizes. But I'm not here to say that the class size in first and second grade has deviated enough to make a difference. I bet it will in kindergarten though.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So just a few of the takeaways from what Ms. Pearson talked about is having a limited RTI model, and in some cases, not much ability at all to provide that to our students catered to, presents itself with a struggle, because whether you're using 10 marks as we use at 3 to 5 and 6 to 8, or another assessment measurement without, and you take that data and you break that data down, without being able to then act upon that data and look at your students who are struggling with a specific concept, 2 or 3 students in one particular class that missed the boat on some level of instruction, without being able to get in there and exercise the RTI model that's done both at the elementary and the middle school level, you're missing that opportunity to right that ship and to allow that student to then move on. And in math, most specifically, if you miss a step along the way, you continue to sort of roll down the hill if you never have the opportunity to hone in on that skill and sharpen it up. And it's interesting to see the 2 schools and to be able to watch that and to see the level of RTI that is happening for a multitude of reasons, which we've been working on quite a bit to see how far we can stretch each one of our people. Another takeaway was time to look at the standards. I mean, this next generation is calling for such an increase in rigor and depth, and our teachers have been trained on the standards and they know what the standards are, and now they're asking us, yes, you're correct, that is the standard, but now we're asking you to do this with that standard, raise the rigor. So in the second grade writing standards for an exemplary writing piece of work from a student, if I put it before you, and we should get you a copy of one, because it's so interesting to look at what's expected of a 7-year-old. And it's 3 to 4 typewritten paragraphs of information that is digging deep into what the question asks. And when you do look at that and you see what sort of an exemplary piece of work from a second grade student looks like, you see why we need to go back with our teaching staff and do our checks and balances to see, do we understand that standard? And that takes time, which we all know how strapped we are for time, trying to meet the minutes of the day that we have to meet, and where we're squeezing out. Somebody wrote us an email this week about wanting more physical time for their children to have recess at the middle school level, and how we just can't fit it all in one day. So we're working on some strategic ways to provide that really focused professional development for our teachers to grab a hold of those standards and match them up to the next generation MCAS and see where we need to dig deeper, starting at kindergarten. So it doesn't, and having Ms. Pearson go after Mr. Harity was sort of purposeful, so we can tie the two together to see sort of the pieces that we're missing.
Just two final points that I would want to make for the committee's consideration, and I'm going to include you, Mrs. Powell, because I know that you're going to be sitting here the next time I'm in front of these folks.
Mr. Fabiano is here as well.
Oh, there you are, Mr. Fabiano. Oh, I just saw you last week, so we'll catch up. No, but I think that, it's important that the committee and the community realize that when you have a change in the format of assessments and you have a change in standards, you have to have a change of instruction. And so in order for us to all get on the same page and figure out our approach to instruction, there's going to need to be some really focused and deep PD. And that's what we began doing this summer at boot camp. If you haven't checked out the documents that have been posted on the district's website, I strongly encourage you to do that. That scope and sequence is really valuable, and members of the community should access it as well.
And it's the scope and sequence of?
That came out from the curriculum boot camp.
Right, and it's
So
on the
it
board, it's on
reflects-
the
yeah.
ATC website.
It's on the district website
district
as well.
website
Yeah.
page as well.
And it reflects work that was done this summer in science, ELA, and math, and other scope and sequences are available as well, including our school's writing. A personal thank you to Mrs. Sullivan and Mr. Holden for your support over the years, and also for the service you've made for our students and staff. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pearson.
Thank you. So next up to talk about our middle school students, and I'm not a very good fan of white, so is Mr. Brian Curley. And I will get you to your, no, it's not helping me there.
So I'll try not to kind of reiterate some of the points regarding the new assessments, but at some points I'll kind of go back to what Mr. Harity and Mrs. Pearson discussed. So first we see grade 6 or 8 ELA. It's comparison of meeting and exceeding expectations. So grade 6 ELA last year, 52% compared to the state at 51%. Grade 7 ELA was 48% compared to the state at 50%. And grade 8 ELA was 58 versus 49. And again, there'll be a slide later on where it kind of breaks down how Mr. Harry did in regards to students who didn't meet or exceed that category that's below partially met. We have a very high percentage that is ready to take that next jump into meeting or exceeding. So takeaways from middle school ELA and structural focus areas. These are the areas that if we look at the data that we got for summertime in the fall in terms of what are some areas that we can really improve on. So starting with the boot camp from K through 8 that we had at the Cummings School, and piggybacking off of that once the school year started, I would say 95% of our teachers, their professional practice goals are working on the areas of curriculum development in terms of looking at the data, whether it's MCAS data, and whether it's our own data, whether it's SRI, SMI, 10 marks, things of that sort, of looking to see the areas that we really struggle with. Because like Mr. Harity said, that if there's one or two questions or there's a certain standard that we're struggling in, we can look at it as a group and see what can we do, whether it's making change in our year-long plan, possibly, how, a certain teaching strategy, and have teachers collaborate and see in a certain class it might have worked out well in a particular question or a standard, and they can collaborate together to try to get us over that hump. For mathematics, I think you'll see some nice growth on the next couple of slides. There's been a huge focus, I know, at the middle school level in terms of professional development and also how we instruct our students in a math classroom. So grade 6 math, we had 50%, and the state was 50% as well. Grade 7, you'll see 42% versus state was 47%. That's something that is kind of will be a celebration you'll see later on in terms of if you looked at where this cohort was 2 years ago, that's definitely one of the shining marks for sure. In grade 8, 54% meeting or exceeding compared to the state at 48%. Similar to ELA, here are the takeaways that we looked at in grades 6 through 8, and again, it varies per age group. And again, with the new with the Next Generation MCAS, there is a focus on more of a deeper conceptual understanding. The days of more of like the, the calculations and the skills, there's more of a focus on really understanding the process and problem solving. So when students, leave school and, they move on to high school and so on, they can use these skills in a more real world application. So all these areas here, every single grade level in the department meetings, common planning time meetings, or data meetings, these are the focuses to see what we can do to take our scores to the next level. So now this is a little tough to see right here. I'll kind of step up here. So this can be found on the district website. So here's kind of a snapshot of all the different categories of meeting, exceeding, partially met, and not met. A couple of things that you see very similar to the old MCAS is SGP, that's the student growth percentile. Basically, what is the growth that our students made at each grade level? And if you notice there, the grade 7 mathematics, where we were 43% of meeting and above, you say that's 4% below the state. But if you slide all the way over here to 59% growth percentile, which is considered high growth, 2 years ago, when this group took the MCAS, the old MCAS in 5th grade, they were 20% below the state of proficient or higher. So we've narrowed that gap. That group has always been weak in mathematics as a cohort. So each year they've made growth, not just in 7th grade, but also in 6th grade when they took the PARC where we didn't have as much data. So that's kind of from 6th to 7th, the collection of the teachers they've had to show that growth. One thing that's new, the Next Generation MCAS, if you see that far right column, achievement percentile, that'll break down how we did versus the state last year in that particular test. So we're pretty proud to see that every single achievement percentile is 50% or above. And again, we want to strive to move those scores up. We don't want to be just 50%. The goal is to keep raising the bar. So for example, when you look at our lowest grade 7 ELA, the 50 percentile, the goal is when they take 8th grade tests is to be 51, be 52, to be higher. So from year to year, we can compare these achievement percentiles. It's very similar to what Mr. Harry mentioned for partially met expectations. We're typically well above the state in our school average versus the state because our not meeting expectations, which is the old failure or warning, we're doing a much better job. So we have this group of kids in partially met. And again, it's a more rigorous test. Those are the kids we're targeting interventions, whether it's in literacy lab or Chrome Math. We're trying to get them to that next level. So in a snapshot, looking at that achievement percentile with everything being 50% above, again, it's the baseline, and our goal is to keep moving those numbers forward. And some of the other highlights we have, if we look at grade 8 ELA, 60% of our kids they met or exceeded expectations. That's just not with the 8th grade teachers. That's the work from grades 6, 7, and 8 in my eyes. And if I went back and look at old MCAS data, pretty much every subject area at every grade level, when they entered 6th grade, are better off than they were then. So it's a combination of going from the Fort Banks, making growth to the Cummings. So when we get a group of students in 6th grade, the goal is to take that and just keep building upon the experiences they had at the Fort Banks and the Cummings. What you don't see up there is science for grade 8, just because they took the old generation MCAS, I guess is one way to put it. But we showed significant growth in science where, let's see, when they took the test in 5th grade, they were 9% below the state average of being proficient or higher. Now, and again, it's not on the slide because it's a different assessment. This year, when they took it in 8th grade, they were 1% above. So they made huge growth from 5th through 8th. And again, that's just not the 8th grade science teachers. That's the instruction in grades 6, 7, and 8 as a whole, which is nice to see.
And I would point out, looking, not just the instruction, but the data, looking at that data right along in data teams as much as we can and as often as we can get our folks in the room to look at where our students are, not just as a group, but individually. And what are we missing that we might not be getting at one particular point? Is it 2 kids that are missing it, or is it 10 kids? Did we miss a whole concept that we now need to focus in on for the next school year and make sure we don't miss it again? So I think it's important to recognize the amount of time that teachers are spending on their own in these groups, and sometimes during common planning time, which is a snapshot of, Brian, correct me if I'm wrong, 30 minutes in a week, or if you did common planning time in 8th grade for science, you know, that's not a lot of time.
And they get creative in terms of before school by having data meetings, so obviously, you know, the workday is jam-packed of going above and beyond, of having teachers even collaborate when they're on duties. We're fortunate at the middle school to have these project areas, so when a teacher is on duty, they're able to collaborate with teachers at their grade level or the subject area, which is nice.
Next one.
Yep, and the last slide kind of just a snapshot of WMS. So the last 2 years, there's been a focused professional development on technology, especially last year we moved into a brand new building. We were fortunate enough to have 500 Chromebooks and other technology where all of our teachers were trained in Google Apps for Education. So we were given these 500 devices, but we were able to use them in a focused way, whether it was math, ELA, science, social studies, or electives, which is nice. That was more last year than this year, because our teachers are at a comfort level moving into year 2 of the new building. Guided math model. So when I worked at the Cummings School, we had the audit of our math instruction. There was definitely a need, I would say, especially at the middle school level, to look at our instruction, of having more of a guided math model in terms of differentiating, meeting the needs of all of our students. And we've seen the growth in 2 years between the Cummings School and middle school in terms of breaking down the data. And the difficult part is at the middle school, when a student goes from grade 5 to grade 6, they have 90 minutes of math at the elementary level. That's something that the state, is a mandate. And when you go to middle school, the time drops to basically they get 55 minutes of math. And again, depending on your at the middle school, it could vary from 45 to 55. We're probably on the higher end. And any students who do need remediation of math, we use our ICE block to give them an additional 35 to 40 minutes, which is nice.
So the ICE block would be similar to an RTI model?
Very different. There's not a separate interventionist in the classroom. They don't have the manpower to have a second body unless it's a co-taught special ed class. But having a content expert that can really try to differentiate and target the weaknesses of the students.
In a larger setting than an RTI setting would be.
Yep. And the last focus PD for this year's curriculum development, again, going back to the boot camp at the Cummings School, of really looking at our standards. And for the most part, we've had either staff meetings or our PD days. 90% of the focus has been on curriculum development, of editing or creating our year-long plans that we started at the boot camp, but then moving on to create unit assessments and things like that. And we've even started with our social studies curriculum, but we've hit a little bit of a snag because the social studies frameworks are changing shortly, so we'll have to make some changes in terms of the grade levels and how we're going to approach those. And the biggest thing is using the data to drive our instruction, of using SRI and SMI, which again are assessments that we give either every quarter or 3 times a year, which gives us more real live data versus MCAS, using 10 marks math. It's a math program that we use as a supplement, that we're able to really personalize every student's work. And then common unit assessments that we give in math, ELA, and we now are in science as well. And social studies is moving in that direction because it's looking to be a standardized testing subject in the next couple of years. And at the middle school level, we obviously can't focus on the social and emotional learning, which has a big impact on whether it's scores or pretty much anything that's connected to the middle school. So some of the things is, so this year we implemented a new health and life skills program. We weren't able to add a health teacher, but we were able to get creative and have our phys ed teacher, who is a certified health teacher, implement a health and life skills program that we're doing for the 2nd and 3rd quarter. Gym time can be very tight when you share with the high school. So we've been able to, during the winter months, to incorporate that more into the classroom, that there's more space available for high school and middle school students, but also give this necessary skills that our kids need. It's our first year implementing the program, so we're using a hybrid version, that way everybody's getting the basic skills, but moving forward it'll be more grade level based and whatnot. We have a very active student council. This school year, we're trying to develop the group of 30 kids to be our school leaders. So if they can act as the role models, it kind of trickles down to our students. They've done a lot of great things in terms of donations to different hurricanes in different areas of the country. They had a food wars where they competed against each grade against each other to try to rally up some food for the winter food pantry, and we collected over 1,200 items. Grade 6 won by about 20 canned items. They had a grade 6 dodgeball game to celebrate it. When I left the school, there was a movie night at the Cumming School. We had 90 students come in to watch Home Alone, have some pizza and water and snacks. So that's a credit to Miss Gallagher and the kids there, because there's a lot on their plate and they're rising to the challenge, which is nice.
If I may, you also did the cleanup. That was a
So,
great
yep,
event.
for grade 8, as being a part of our stand-up as one, we had 98% of our grade 8 students go down to Ingleside Park to do a cleanup. And then later in the year, we'll have a different activity for grades 6 and 7 when the weather gets better. Of just trying to give back to the community, and these students have to realize these values at an early age. And as a whole, you hope that these little things will make a big difference.
I think it's important too, Brian, to note, and you sometimes sell yourself short on this, is the community building at the middle school level, where students are working together in groups, having to problem solve, having to figure out how to get along as a community of one, with the Stand Up as One philosophy and core value that they have. You can't remove that from the learning process and how that affects students, whether they're in a history class, a math class, an RTI group. When students are more comfortable with themselves and working with each other and understanding little simple things as turn taking, and we have a diverse group of, more diverse than we have had in the past, group of students who are coming from all different kinds of backgrounds. So that sneaking in of learning and teaching and learning from a social emotional perspective, we're not just playing down the park, we're not just picking up trash and hoping we don't get our hands dirty or get cut on something. You have teachers and educational leaders around the groups of students promoting the social emotional well-being so that they can function just like the next generation MCAS is directing us, so that they can function as an adult member of society, whether it be in reading, whether it be in math, whether it be in the work environment. The structure of the high school, the common learning areas in the middle school, creates a whole different world for our students. We're not sitting in rows in classrooms having to raise our hand constantly and receive permission to get a thought out. And some of these unstructured, unstructured/structured social emotional learning times is continuous teaching around our standards. So I think it's important just to throw kudos your way. It's a nice job.
And at the middle school, I like to put it as organized chaos, because
Yeah.
it's a very challenging age group. No 2 days are the same, similar in all the buildings. But obviously, students will make mistakes. They'll make some big mistakes, and you hold them accountable. But you hope to use those as learning experiences, no matter the extreme of the mistake or not. So, and the last one, it comes down to having very fortunate to come in last year as a first-year principal and having a great staff of teachers that work very, very hard. And it makes it a little bit easier each day to keep working with our students. So,
Thank you.
Thank
Any
you,
questions
Mr.
from the group?
Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
thank you.
Next up is our high school, Mr. Matt Corby. And I'm doing my slideshow.
Last but not least.
Yeah, right? Hope you guys are still with me on this.
Sometimes
So-
it's good to go last.
Yeah, it is, sometimes it is. So what's nice about what I'm going to talk about is a little bit more straightforward than the other schools, because we're still taking what's considered to be the old MCAS. As of 2019, we'll be moving towards the next generation MCAS, but right now we're still on the MCAS that we all know and love. So the two ways we have tonight that I want to talk about the MCAS grade 10 results. One is going to be in regards to student achievement. And just to remind everyone, these are the 4 performance levels: advanced, proficient, needs improvement, and failing. And I also want to take a look at our student growth percentile, which is the change in student achievement over time. For Winthrop High School, this is the measure of students on their grade 8 MCAS, and then to where they are on the grade 10 MCAS for both English and mathematics. So the first slide I wanted to put up was to point out the increase we've had in the amount of students that are scoring in the advanced range on English. This is our English language arts. So as you can see, we have 63% of our students in the advanced range, and that is it's the highest it's been in the last 5 years. So, that's a definite positive for us. Every year you strive to move students up. If you have kids in, the proficient range, obviously you want to move into the advanced, and certainly from the needs improvement into the proficiency. So that's a huge increase for us. It's something we want to keep pushing forward. The next slide, I just wanted to take a second to take a look at you can go into a million different ways to look at this data, certainly going by different item analysis and whatnot. But we've spent a lot of time over the last couple of years working on our open response. So I wanted to take a look at our open response scoring averages and just point out that, in 2017, because of the great work we've done in our English department, we've been able to, our average, which is basically the open responses of a 4 point, you can be awarded 4 points. Our average is 3.09, which is above the proficiency line, well above the state average, and certainly the highest it's been. So just a piece of data that I wanted to point out, because our English department has done a lot of great work on the open response sections. Kind of the biggest thing that I wanted to point out in regards to our English scores is the student growth. So, like we said, the student growth paints a picture of where our students were in grade 8 and how far they've come along towards grade 10. For us to be, our student growth this year is, we were in the 77th percentile, which is a tremendous amount of growth for our students from where they were. As you can see over the last 5 years, last year we did show significant growth, but this being in the 77th percentile is far beyond where we've been in the last 5 years. That growth is very high in regards to the rest of the schools in the state. There's roughly 400 high schools in the Commonwealth, and with a median growth percentile of 77, that placed us in 10th in the state out of all high schools. So pretty impressive number. So certainly we're moving our students in the right direction. As far as the mathematics is concerned, which is the next slide, just showing you again, the amount of students that have scored in the advanced range has increased since last year, up 9% from last year, and certainly the highest it's been in 5 years, with the exception of 2014. As you can see, we were also had 59% of our students scoring in the advanced range. Mathematics has been, a hot topic for the high school over the last couple of years, and I was very glad to see this, because it's showing that a lot of the things that we put in place to move our students forward are working. And then this next slide is kind of the one that really hits home as far as what we're doing with our students. I thought the growth in English was awesome. The growth in math is off the charts. So if you can see over the last 5 years where our median growth percentile has been, at 80.5, that puts us 6th in the state for high schools.
So I think it's important to point out that the state says a high student growth percentile would be 60%. And a mid-level student growth would be 50%. Low student growth would be considered 40% jump. Winthrop High School jumped 80.5%, and that's crazy. And how they got there is what goes on every single day in the middle school, the elementary school, the high school, that build up. Also, I think it speaks to the amount of time Mr. Crumby and I have had as I'm learning about sort of what teachers do at the high school, what teachers do at the middle school during common planning time. There's lots of conversation around the math curriculum, how we were utilizing our math curriculum. Some folks felt as though we were using hybrid versions of curriculum and we needed a specific book, and a book was going to do it. And the data team, made up of many teachers, including the lead teacher, Mr. Beck, along with Mr. Corumby, sitting down and looking at our student data, student by student, item analysis, looking at question by question, and then taking that information and looking at what they're teaching, whether it be Algebra 1, Algebra 2, geometry, taking a peek at what they are teaching, when they're teaching it, how deep they're diving into those subject matters, what students are falling low in some areas that need that support, All of that sort of time and energy and effort, looking at the nitty-gritty, is what caused that, and is what made our students jump that high. I mean, what did you say, 6? Is that the number?
6 in the state, yeah.
Out of
400.
400 high schools. So of course, we had to go back and look at it maybe 10 times. And then we actually asked a consultant, can you just take a peek at this? I happen to be an audit magnet I think I was just born that way. So I'm looking at this, and in my brain, the way my brain functions, gee, 6th in the state. How did we get there? And we better be able to tell that story. So we have spent quite a bit of time looking at how we did get there. And we know the formula, and it pretty much speaks to it. If you stick around with us long enough, this is what you see by the time you get to 10th grade. And I know that's a very simplistic way to look at things, but if you listen to what happens at pre-K to 2 and the data that gets crunched at 3 to 5, and then what happens when we become middle schoolers, which we all know is a whole separate being as a human. What happens when we get to middle school and we do it all again, and we have to throw the social emotional piece in there at another level. And then by the time we get to 10th grade, when, not that it doesn't count in every other grade, but sort of the stakes become pretty high, because the state is now telling us this is how you move along. This is how you get a piece of paper that says you've graduated from Winthrop High School with a high school diploma. And from a special ed perspective, my philosophy has I've always had a rough time with the MCAS and the scores and how they pinpoint our students. Moving on now, we now need to dig even deeper, because we have next generation MCAS, which we saw what's happening at the lower levels and how the rigor is being pushed, and the deepness of what we get into in our curriculum is being pushed, and how they're sort of changing the game with the standards that are there. So we have to go back again into our own curriculum, that some which we've developed, some which is commercialized because it's aligned with the standards, and continuously look at, are we in line with what the state is asking us? And not to forget the multiple assessments that go on at every grade level beyond just this one test. Because again, this is old news to us. This is October news. So we've sort of been at this as early as the summer, checking out next generation and what they're going to be asking us to do, and preparing ourselves, not just with one summer course, but with the day in and the day out of squeezing in as much group work around data and around looking at individual students as we can, so that we can continue in this path. Sorry, Matt, I didn't mean to steal your thunder, but
No, that's fine.
I got
Obviously we're really proud of that growth, and that's something that the teachers, it's good for them to see and know that they're making a difference on a daily basis, and that they have brought this group of students from the 8th grade to where they are now. A lot of this, the growth that we've seen in both English and math, I think is attributed to having a curriculum director, which Frank Woods was really a big piece in helping me look at the data, helping me connect with my lead teachers and talk about and setting up data teams and getting into areas that we know needed attention. We had talked at the last couple of times we did these presentations about our math curriculum and our course for mathematics, and exposing our students to 2 math courses their sophomore year. We've gone away from that, and we got back to that. So I think that move had a significant impact in us showing more growth for our students, and so we're hoping keeping it that way moving forward is going to be, we'll continue to see growth.
So questions for Matt before I summarize a little bit?
Just a comment, I think the community owes a great bit of gratitude, because like a lot of your scores go back to 214 where they were high, and they transitioned down as much as the school district transitioned during the building of the new school, and so this new school is now into its 2nd year, and I like to think that had a major effect on the positive and motivational and everything the students and staff have.
No doubt about it. And you can see it when you look at the
Right.
numbers from the years. You can see the years we were, in the transition
Right.
in the middle school. Not only were we in a different physical space, but having the 8th grade be a part of the high school, there's just a lot that plays into that. So for us to get back to where we were and then start to move forward is big for us.
Well, to credit you and the staff, and to bring us back.
Yeah.
It was more than just the building.
Thank you, yeah. I will say that just to echo what Brian said about the teachers, it's incredible how much responsibility they feel about this and how hard they work with our students on a daily basis to make sure that, not just in regards to the MCATs, but that our students are progressing forward. I'm really lucky to have the staff that I have, so.
Matt, I just have a question about, because 10th grade MCAS is a requirement for graduation, do you know how many students we have that are taking this test again or did not meet that requirement?
Yes, I do. So 9 in mathematics and 1 in English.
And
We're
they
in
have
the
an
failing range.
opportunity to retake
Yeah, so
it?
they'll be doing the retakes. They already did do retakes at the beginning of November.
Okay. Not to take away from the.
No, I know.
Not to take away from the growth.
Yeah,
I wanted to see where we were at with that
yeah, and that's
graduation requirement.
the failure level for math was about where it has been. There's been same for English. There's some years in English where we don't have anyone fail, which is great, and this year we just happen to have 1.
Mm-hmm.
But the English is usually tends to be a little bit lower than math.
Thank you.
Thanks, Matt. So to sort of wrap up and give you some of my thoughts moving forward, the coordinated efforts of the 4 amazing principals, our assistant principals who cover classes when we have data meetings, our paraprofessionals who do the same, our ESPs, speech and language pathologists, our RTI folks, our parents who grind out 10 marks and Lexia and who work hard with their students at home to make sure they're continuing to read. That needs to continue. Our boot camps, for example, scope and sequence, and ongoing review, our data teams at every level, those coordinated efforts, K through 12, have to continue. The cohesive group of administrators has been super helpful. People getting in a room together and sort of owning their own piece, but celebrating what happens in the 10th grade as a whole. And that's a district celebration. Students didn't just show up at the 10th grade all ready to pass the MCAS. There was a heck of a lot of work that had gone on all the way through. And then once we get to the 10th grade, we don't stop, because the next step is to prepare our students to continue on for post-secondary education, work, or military, and to become productive citizens. I think that all of our staff has to be deeply involved in the data analysis, not just some, but all, raising the rigor in instruction and continuing the priority of high expectations for all students. And that value and that core value and that message has to be driven into a district-wide strategic plan. I think, in closing, investing in high-quality coordination and administration of curriculum and instruction, vertical teaming, transitional grade curriculum assignment, meaning grade to grade, school to school, as we transition from 2nd to 3rd and from 8th to 9th. That's extremely important. Data analysis, technology integration, and opportunity aligned professional development that's linked both vertically and horizontally between schools and with rigor and tied to the district's objectives, and also in the oversight of quality teacher recruitment and retainment. This is the key to success. When you look at those 10th grade scores, many of those things are in there. For this district to continue to embrace that, to manage it, to have the right people in place to be able to do the sort of grunt work, to get a hold of the data and bring it to the teachers so that with suggestions and with information from the State Department of Education and the Curriculum Coordinators Association on common assessment and aligning things. We don't have to recreate the wheel and spend extraordinary amounts of time on figuring out how to get there. We'd rather our teachers be in the classroom doing the direct instruction. I'm proud to work in Winthrop when I look at these scores. However, I'm dazzled by what goes on in the buildings that I would not have otherwise known if I did not embed myself in the schools and speak with the principals and with the assistant principals and the teachers about the day-to-day work. It is truly impressive. And congratulations to the principals. Well done. And the administrators. I'd like them to, at this point, perhaps if there are no further questions, to go do some data dancing somewhere. Because I know I know that they have things to do. But if anyone has any other questions,
No, I think we're
otherwise.
good, thank you.
I just have to correct myself. Get back to
Yeah,
the
yeah.
agenda.
Enjoy your break.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thanks, Doc.
Nice job.
Thank you.
So I know this was a little bit of a different version than you're used to, but I've sat at MCAS review sessions, with all due respect to the folks walking out the door, that have been hours long. And the only thing I think I gained from many of them
Nice
is
job, Mike.
sort of just being really tired at the end and not remembering a lot of what was said. We have
Nice
the
job, Mike.
documentation, we have the intricate data available for any parent, any community member who does want to come in. We're better at getting it off of the state's website than the average person. It's sort of an annoying website to be on. You have to do all kinds of movement throughout the website to get what you're looking for. If you're a hyper clicker like me, you get yourself into pages that you don't need to be in. So we would offer that at a deeper level. I know that each principal is going to be doing it with their staff.
I think we appreciate the summary for sure, and I
Yeah.
think when the new school committee comes on, they may have questions about
Sure.
any action plan that's being taken, but I think that was certainly sufficient, and it was a nice review for us. Also, it's a baseline, it's we're comparing apples to oranges except for 10th grade, so
Right.
it's important to note that it's not going to affect our leveling, and it's not going to affect how we did from last year to this year. So
And they do have those intricate plans for their buildings. They're in the midst
Right.
of them. So they've been developed, and they're working on them, tweaking them as we move along. But those are definitely available to speak on at a deeper level when ready.
Great. All right, let's get back to our agenda. We are on to correspondence. Pardon me, we received some emails that I will just quickly summarize. We received an email from Leah Hart-Tenon, dear school committee and town council members. It is my privilege to submit this letter in support of Shauna Hodge Barnett to be the next school committee member to fill the vacated spot by Dr. Laura Callis. She goes on to talk about the qualifications that she believes Ms. Hodge Barnett has professionally and personally. We received an email from Shannon Vieira. To the members of the town council and the school committee. I'm writing as a concerned parent in regards to the open position on the school committee. She also urges us to appoint Shauna Hodge and to take a look at Suzanne Swope for the next vacancy. She also comments on both of the applicants' experience. Thank you, Shannon. Next, we have some correspondence from John Lyons. He has resubmitted that he is still interested in the vacancy that we currently have, and he has noted his experience, 22 years in public school education, and he also sent his resume along as well. Next, we have an email from Tanya Mendieta. Dear Mrs. Sullivan, my name is Tatiana, and I'm a mother of 2 children in the Winthrop Public Schools, with one student having special education services. She goes on to say she's looking for a candidate who would be a strong supporter and advocate to all Winthrop students, including those who receive special education. And then in her last paragraph, she goes on to recommend Ms. Shauna Hodge due to her experience. We have another email from Dr. Suzanne Swope, restating her desire to fill the vacancy we currently have. She goes on to talk about her being a supporter of innovation. She wants to help us out with problem solving, federal, state initiatives, teacher retention, and her contributions from her experience as an educator herself. We have an email from Mary Alice Sharkey in support of, dear school committee members, I am asking you to vote and support Gus Martucci for school committee. Gus has tremendous financial knowledge, which is vital to the success of the school system moving forward. She says, as a former teacher and school committee member herself, she recognizes the importance of a strong curriculum member, but without knowledgeable finance person on board, the management of getting vital resources to our school children becomes a struggle. Thank you, Mary Alice. And that is all of the correspondence we received in time for the packet. We are next on to public comment. Ms. Chavez.
Just to be repetitive, I had seen the MCAS from the middle school before. I'd seen that report. I was very impressed with it. Now to see the other two, I can't congratulate the teachers any more than that. And to hear Mrs. Pearson say that she feels as though the product that she's sending from first school to the third grade is great. I remember, and I've said this so many times, when Ryan Harity first came to Winthrop and he was the assistant principal at the middle school, he was appalled the amount of kids that could not read at a middle school level. And it sounds like we've reached that we've gone above that, and these kids do read, and if you can't read, you can't do math, and you can't do science. So everything's going in the right direction, that's for sure.
Thank you. Any other public comment? No further public comment. We'll move on to the minutes. We'll take them separately. We have the minutes from November 27th, 2017 in our packet for review. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Motion by Mr. Vecchia. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Vice Chair Perrin. Any discussion on the minutes? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Motion passes. Minutes will be approved. We also have the minutes from Thursday, December 7th.
Motion.
Second.
Oh, yes. Oh, sorry. This was a special meeting. Motion by Vice Chair Perrin, second by Mr. Vecchia. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions?
One abstain.
Thank you, Mr. Holden. Motion passes. The minutes are approved. Next, we have the warrants. We have warrant SPW 18-10 in the amount of $666,668 even. I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Vecchia. Any discussion on the warrant? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Do you want to start signing this? Yes, no. Next, we have some budget transfers. I'll make a motion to approve them all together. One is for $41,013.71. The next is for $101,735. The third one is $3,500. Motion to approve them all together. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Mr. Vecchia. Any discussion on the budget transfers?
Just, we're moving pennies on some of them.
Yep, so
Well,
I
you
can
can do
speak,
that.
I can
Just-
speak,
it's just-
I can speak about
Yeah.
it, so it's just
Round
my
up to
annoying
that.
practice
Thank you.
of, we are moving pennies, and as I said from the get-go, I am used to moving pennies in the budget, so that at the end of the day, I know exactly what we
You're not
have
waiting till
spent,
June.
and as I am being asked to plan a budget for, 6 or 7 months from now, it helps my brain to be able to look at a line item and say, this is exactly what we spent, and clean those lines up so that as we prepare the budget for next year. And
We do it every year. I'm just
Usually
doing
we-
it a lot
yeah,
earlier
we usually-
than normal.
wait and,
And a lot of them. But no, I took notes.
yeah, so, and my sort of, I
Did you
have
put them in the
trouble
piggy
with
bank?
patience.
Is it in the piggy
Yeah,
bank somewhere?
my patience doesn't allow
All
me
those
to sort of.
pennies add up to a few
Yeah,
dollars.
they
so.
do, and some of the other transfers are around moving money from some lines to offset sort of an opening deficit in the school year, so we had some bills that had to, from last year that were, that there was not funding to cover, so I was presented with that information after the budget was already set, so I need to continue with frozen the budget, and therefore, I need to continue to make sure that we cover some of those bills. And then on the homeless transportation and the out-of-district transportation, we are, again, moving money from a line item that had X amount of dollars that we know we won't need to use all of that, to offset and sort of straighten those lines out for it to be the expected amount. So if we expect we're gonna pay 180 in special ed transportation, and that's a fake figure, I'm throwing that out there, and there's 150 in that line, and then we have a homeless line that has 100 in it, and we know we're only gonna spend 50, I would prefer at this time to move the 50 to the line item where I know that there is a calculated expense, so that, again, we're shifting the money to where the expense is, to be sure that we're doing it in a timely fashion, so there's not X amount of dollars left over at any point. And if there is money available, that we're gonna close on target and without deficit, which is my plan.
Any other discussion on the budget transfers?
Just curiosity, from the homeless and the salary van, do they correlate? Since the homeless transportation is down, that means we need less drivers, and so correlated the same decrease?
So yes,
Okay, it was just one if there's a correlation there.
sort of, and also it involves some outside vendors.
Okay.
So if the outside vendor cost is down, then we can decrease that, or if the outside vendor cost is up and the inside drivers are down,
Yeah.
just shifting it. And I know it's somewhat annoying, I apologize, but it allows me to keep a constant eye on how we're doing things, and thank God for Susan.
Okay, for the budget transfers, all in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you. Budget transfers are passed. Next on the agenda, we have buildings and grounds, which we have no request for. We'll go right down to subcommittee reports. We did have a budget subcommittee on, December 11th. In attendance was myself and Vice Chair Perrin, also Mrs. Eccles, Superintendent Howard, and Mr. Capriaco was also present. The meeting was called to order at 7:05 p.m. Mrs. Eccles and Superintendent Howard reviewed expenses and bills which occurred in fiscal year 17, which were not accounted for in that budget, and we did use some of fiscal year 18 allocation to pay those bills. We do currently have a budget freeze, and all purchase orders are going through the superintendent's office at this time. And some of the budget transfers we just looked at or were talked about in that budget subcommittee meeting as well. Ms. Eccles and Superintendent Howard are working closely together to review the entire budget so as not to impact any personnel lines. Mr. Perrin and I were in agreement that this is really an example of why this Winthrop School District needs a certified school business manager of our own that can help us with these types of issues. Additionally, related to utilities, our utilities were $35,000 range in July, and they have come down to $16,000 in October. And we can thank our operations manager, Mikhail, who has been diligent about operating the HVAC in the new school more efficiently, and the teachers' cooperation for simple things like keeping the windows closed, so as not to trigger other air conditioning or lights being on, things like that. So thank you to Mikhail and the staff at the new middle and high school. There were no votes taken, no motions made, no votes taken. And that was it. Yeah.
That's it?
Yeah, and we did have a superintendent contract bargaining that was done in an executive session with Vice Chair Perrin and myself. So there's nothing to report for that. On the same night, 12/11/17. Okay,
Superintendent's
sorry.
report will be somewhat short this evening. So just an update on the playground at the Gorman Fort Banks and at the Arthur T. Cummings. I have been working closely with both principals to take a peek at those parks. I have read through along and sat with the town manager and both principals, as well as the facilities director for the town and for the school. And we took that report and went to each building and looked at the park and looked at what the recommendations were to sort of balance the work that had been done, if it had been done, to really figure out what has been done, what has not been done, and what needs to be done. I was a little bit uncomfortable with the report itself because I didn't understand the categories. And I didn't understand how a crack at the bottom of a slide would lead to a category 1, which is a category that puts you in potential for death. And other categories are simplistic, where a student may be injured but not at the level of death. So there were so many that it was death or critical injury. And as a parent of 4 students, if I read that and I knew nothing about park reports, I would be upset, and I would be concerned, and I would want answers. So we called the woman who did the inspection. We asked her to come out at no charge to us and explain the report, as well as come and see the park and tell us how these categories get figured. So it's a state reporting system, and it's the potential of. And so when you come down a slide, if there's a deep crack in a slide and you happen to have a hoodie on that has a string, it could get caught in that and it could choke you. Doesn't mean it's going to happen, but it potentially could happen. So if they notice things that have the potential to injure a child, then they figure out where on the injury list that would go. When we went through the parks, we looked at a number of things that had been repaired, whether it was taking rungs off of a ladder or adding plastic around the chains on the swings. Some of that work had been done, and there's a fair amount of work that had not been done. The surface at the Arthur T. Cummings seems to be the biggest cost item and the biggest sort of hazard, according to the report. There are places where students could trip. It has tie rods around the surface, and the surface itself has sort of seen its day, for lack of better terms, when a student falls down onto that surface. And the woman was sort of putting it, I guess, in layman's terms. She said she'd like to see the bounce factor, where her child, if they hit it, would bounce a little bit. She doesn't feel that there'll be any bouncing on that surface. So we took that information and we met back with the town manager as well, and he asked lots of questions about cost and could she give us some additional information after she did the walkthrough. So upon doing her walkthrough, she told us that she saw some work that had been done. She would still recommend some other work. She's going to give us a written sort of checkoff list of things that she thinks that we would be able to do. Everything from taking the facility completely down and redoing it from scratch to another level of just adding a new platform or a new floor, a bounceable floor surface, for lack of better terms. In the meantime, we have researched and found warranties on the slides, so we are able to replace one slide under warranty. We're still working on the second one, and the slide over at the Gorman Fort Banks, which broke mitts in the middle of this whole process, cracked. That also has a warranty. So we've closed 2 of those slides until they are reordered. I have a meeting with the town manager after the Christmas break to come up with sort of a timeline and a price list of what it will cost and some ideas about how we may be able to cover those costs. But we're waiting to hear back from the inspector just in terms of what she thinks would be the best plan, given what she sees and how she sees it now. It is a serious issue. Our students need time to play. It's not just outside running around for physical activity, but it's a social activity for our students. It's how we teach kids to interact with each other. So taking the park down and pulling all the equipment down will not benefit the students at all. And therefore, we would like a better solution to that. If it means that we have to repair, that's fine. If it means that we have to replace, that's fine too, but we'll have a plan in place to do that in the near future. I did ask her if we needed to shut the park down. That was my first question. And she said no. She did not believe we needed to shut it down. Some of the things that we've done, structures that we've removed, and the slides that are coming that are now blocked, she felt as though if we did some short-time repairs until we could come up with a larger plan. So the funding for that is not known yet, but we'll figure that out. Town manager is willing to work with us. We have a lot of students that play in that park. After school hours, it's a community park. It's utilized by a lot of people, as is the Gorman Fort Banks Park as well. So facilities has also put together a weekly checklist of the park, in which, of both parks, Gorman Fort Banks and Arthur T. Cummings, where the custodial staff will have a check sheet that they have to weekly go around, whether it's a chain on a swing or a swing itself or a broken step ladder, anything that's new from where we met with the inspection moving forward. So that process is already in place. If a little bit easier at the Gorman Fort Banks because the structures are fairly new, with the exception of the slide. And at the Arthur T. Cummings, the facilities manager was with us when we were looking, so they have a baseline of what the park is now, and will continue to make small, improvements if they can until we get that inspection recommendation back. So that was the playground budget moving forward. January 4th through the 11th, I have one-to-one meetings with the principals. They've been given budget sheets a little different than last year that span everything from curriculum to supplies to bodies. They have to tell me how many full-time equivalent teachers they have. They have schedules that they have to fill out, time schedules. Where are you every minute of the day this year, and how do you see that need for next year? As well as justifying the need for increasing or decreasing any cost items, whether it's furniture or whether it's a curriculum, and how they came to that conclusion. In their one-to-one meetings with me, we'll talk about those. And then I will take that show on the road to the building and present the principal's recommendation, which he's working on with his staff, to the staff, and get some feedback from them with just them in the room, just voluntarily teachers, staff members from the building, and myself. And then we will move forward to continue our budget work. We've had some loss of money over unexpected from the state. The 298 and the 274 grants were eliminated. Those are two special ed grants that help us with offset costs for paraprofessional, a portion of paraprofessional salary, as well as about 20, I believe it's about 21,000 in professional development, special ed professional development. So that was somewhat of a hit and unexpected, not just from the town of Winthrop, but if you're not a level 3 school, those grants got cut. So I'm happy that we're not a level 3 school. A little disappointed that we lost that. It's an exercise or a reminder of surplanting versus supplementing, and most districts quasi-supplement and quasi-surplant because we all know we need the money, but this is a hard reality of when that money gets cut. Some things that we've gained in the meantime, which I think is important to talk about, is we've renegotiated the cost of natural gas with National Grid, sort of eliminating National Grid. Moving forward, we're waiting for the cost savings allocation to come to us. I believe it's going to be a significant plus for us, much less cost per therm. I'm not going to pretend to know what that means, but Terry was paramount in getting that work done. We've also renegotiated with Retrofit, which is the company that manages our IT and manages our Chromebooks and whatnot. Brought them down off the ledge for a 12% discount effective December 1st, which is approximately $841 less per month. And believe me, I have a bucket for that money. However, just trying to scrape any pennies we can, and this is the time to negotiate with people who offer us contracts as they're nearing the end of their contract and they want to talk about next year. I need to little good faith effort on their part to keep me in the conversation. So I'll be talking with them about a longer term contract now that I've accepted this 12% decrease. And IPASS. So IPASS manages our student information system. They're at the end of their contract now, at the end of this school year. So we brought them in. They've traditionally been a 1-year contract. And I asked them to come with a proposal for a 3-year contract. So their 1-year contract was a 5% increase, and we landed a 3-year contract for 3%, 2%, and 1%, and then embedded some professional development at no cost to us in the meantime. With the student information systems, you're not just going to randomly change that over a 3-year time frame. IPASS is pretty Harris Solutions is a pretty well-known company, so I don't anticipate that we would have a worry about contracting for 3 years. I don't like 1-year deals because it's more meetings and you can't be as creative in the contracts. So those, for every bad thing that happens, you get some good things that can kind of offset that. And then Miller Field meetings begin again in January around, Matt Serino and Matt Crombie have done some great work around thoughts after the first game, after we've been able to sit back and reflect on that, and thoughts moving forward. And Terry Delahanty, Chief Delahanty, is going to be involved in that to talk, as well as Vinnie Crossman is going to come in to talk to us about where they're at in terms of finishing the field house and whatnot, so we can make some plans for how that field is going to really open. Because when we do open it, I would like it to be a nice celebration of all of our athletes and the community, but we need to know where we're at with the community and where we're at with the school in terms of combined use of that field. So those conversations begin again in January. And last but not least, we open up a new website. School Fusion is retiring. I don't know how you retire as a website, but I guess that means you don't work anymore. So they are no longer going to be the platform for our website. We've done a lot of work on the new platform. Sort of wasn't our choice about whether or not we wanted to keep them because they're retiring. Gio and Petro, our IT guys, have worked closely with Patty and with the principals and our IT people in the school buildings to build the site. They transitioned everything, and everything carried over, which is pretty important. Teachers have years of work on their web pages that they've designed. If you've ever had a kid at the Gorman Fort Banks, you know those teachers put up links, they put up homework, they put up reading things, they put up pictures, they put up scope and sequence for their programming, and they were afraid, as was I, that those things were going to sort of morph into nowhere when you switch from one platform to the next. I'm happy to report that we morphed right to where we need to be. There was a tremendous amount of cleanup. It's kind of like 52 card pickup. When you send it over to a new website, you have to redesign stuff. And we've also asked for a community member who is well-versed at designing websites that are attractive to people to come in and help me design the district's webpage so that people want to go on it. If I open up a web page and it looks confusing, I usually click to something else or just start hyper-clicking to try to find out where I need to be. So this particular person has offered to come in and make it pretty. That's what she does for a living, and it's an engagement, a piece of community engagement that I think is super necessary. Parents need to be able to use that website with ease. And so that's the whole point of that. So I thank that community member who will be named once I convince her to be named. And we are launching that new website, and we'll be notifying teachers. They know it's coming, but we're going to give them a link to go on and try it out for a week, and then it will go live to the parents, and the parents will be getting an email telling them that it's going live. We were advised by the company to sort of wait to tell people because people panic and want to find out, identify every reason that we shouldn't do it, but we didn't really have a choice. So we feel as though it will go off relatively smoothly, and that is all I have.
All right, let's go right into.
Can I make one quick question?
Sure, Mr. Bianco.
Just if we can, I know there's been a lot of conspiracy theories on Facebook regarding the playground.
Mm-hmm.
So once we decide exactly what we're doing moving forward, if we could just add that to your newsletter or
Sure.
a quick summary
Yep.
and post it on Facebook.
So I have been updating any parent who has contacted
Yep.
me. All of you know, I feel like Bill Belichick because I'll name it wrong, but I chatting or whatever people do, Facebook is not my forte.
Yep.
Patty is very good at it. So if a parent contacts me directly, I'm very good at email correspondence and phone correspondence and face-to-face meetings. Anything that's put on Facebook, it's nice that they do that, but if they would like a response, they need to come to me or someone else they feel comfortable with in the district, or send an email. Patty is very good at keeping the schools, and we have responded to every one of those people.
Yep,
We've also
absolutely.
notified all of the coming school parents in Ryan Harity's newsletter when we heard that there was some confusion, and when I received a couple of emails from parents, we felt the need to let the parents know that we were on this and we were taking it very seriously based on the information we received. And Patty has put stuff out on the school's Facebook webpage, which is not an interactive page. For those people who are getting annoyed that we're not responding, it's not interactive, it's informational purposes only. But thank you for that.
Anything else? Okay, thank you. If you want to move right into personnel.
Yes, so we have a crossing for appointments. We have none at this time. For resignations, we have none. For retirement, we have Miss Lorraine DeFranzo has already retired. She sent a note that she inadvertently forgot to request her sick leave buyback, and so her letter is included in your packet, and I would ask that you
Yeah.
take that into consideration.
Yes,
So I
Mr.
was gonna
Parrish.
say, I'll make a motion that we accept the sick time buyback.
A second.
Second by Mr. Vecchia. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.
And we have two continuing postings for positions that were discussed at the last meeting for a crossing guard and an ESP position that continue to be posted. And the crossing guard, I believe, is for at the end of the coming school driveway, and the ESP is the same for the middle school.
Thank you.
And we have no leave of absence at this time.
Okay.
And that's it for personnel.
So personnel, thank you. On to new business, we have a chemical health violation policy. Is this our first reading tonight, or we're reviewing this tonight to refer to policy subcommittee?
Is that the one that was on your desk?
Yes.
That's good. They would like to make a revision to that, and
Yes.
that's outlined in that, to indicate what it is that they're actually doing, so
Right.
sort of to update that particular policy,
Mhm.
so that was one.
Right.
Let
Mr.
me
Barron?
make a motion to send it to the policy committee.
Yep, I'll second, to make a motion to send the chemical health violation policy to the policy subcommittee. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Abstentions? Thank you.
Is that the only policy that
I
is?
think there were
that-
other
I think
ones.
there is more than one, and it also to the subcommittee to review and update the current substance use and prevention education policy.
Okay, I'm looking at the agenda, and the agenda says chemical health violation policy, but inside the packet, substance abuse prevention and education policy, smoking on premises policy. Yeah, so there's 3 total.
Motion, same motion for those.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Abstentions?
Yes, and the letter on your desk was just something that Brian Curley had that had to do with the substance abuse policy. If you could just consider it in the policy subcommittee.
It had an age change in it, a grade level change in it that they wanted for technical language.
Right.
I just needed that to be changed.
So this has to do with the new state mandated student brief intervention referral and treatment
Correct.
screening that the school nurses are doing.
Correct.
So that'll get passed on to the next policy subcommittee in January.
They just needed to change the grade from 8, it says 8 to 10, they want to change it to 7 to 9. They need to bring it back, they wanted to bring it back a little
It's a good move.
earlier.
Yeah.
So they just need the language changed, so refer is perfectly fine.
Yeah, okay. So that will get taken care of with the next school committee, is my guess. We have nothing under unfinished business. Back to public comment.
Want to say goodbye to Bill, I guess. You know,
You
he and I have,
know where to find him?
yeah, he and I have had we go around for over 12 years, but we always seem to make out okay, I guess.
It's like the Muppet movie, you know, the 2 people that sit up in the balcony always
Yep.
talking, chastising.
Exactly.
Exactly.
There you are,
You're right.
Barbara and Karen. I'm gonna miss you 2. In a good way.
That's the
Okay.
best ever.
I'll still be here though.
I know. I know where you live. I know where you live.
All right, and I'm sorry I missed that budget meeting. I really had wanted to go to that, but we had field finance that night, we had town finance that night, so it was kind of I had to pick my battles, I guess, that night.
I know it, right? Okay, so we are on to public relations. Mr. Vecchia.
Nothing.
Mr. Capianco.
Nothing.
Good.
Mr. Holden. I actually have a couple things. I wanted to say thank you to Mr. Crombie and several other people for having the vaping information session at the high school 2 weeks ago now, I want to say. It was, the information was incredible. The parents that attended learned a lot, including myself. I know Mrs. Powell was there. Mr. Fabiano was present as well. Several parents said, I forgot it was tonight, or I didn't have enough notice, and several parents would like a repeat of that. And several middle school parents would like information as well. And so I know we were gonna post something on the school website or somehow get part of the presentation that we had that night. But many parents are concerned, many parents are seeing students on sidewalks right across from the school, or are very just stunned and surprised at how many students are into this and how accessible it is. And some of that is because it's vaping is really marketed to kids. So I won't go on and on about that, but the information session was outstanding, and I would love to have a repeat. I would love to have it taped on WCAT so that we have a real version of that to disseminate to the whole community. I was invited to speak at the CPAC meeting, the Special Education Parent Advisory Council, by Tanya Mendieta this month, just on the role of the school committee. It was not well attended by parents, unfortunately. I think another situation where it wasn't promoted with a lot of notice, so I think that we could do a better job of getting information out there sooner than a couple of days ahead of the event. But it was a great discussion. Mr. Carabianco also was there. Thank you for coming. Mrs. Powell was there. So it was actually a great discussion, and my takeaway is that parents really want to connect with each other. So if there are opportunities, whether it's a special education meeting, whether it's some other kind of night out at the school, parents are really looking to connect with each other. And I think these kind of information sessions are a great way to do that. The next month, the topic is going to be sensory processing, one of my favorite topics, so maybe I'll attend that one too. And congrats to the middle school drama club for Bye Bye Birdie. Amazing. I don't know if you could squeeze one more student on that stage, but they included so many students, and hats off to Mrs. Daly. I don't know if she changed her name after she got married, but she's amazing. The kids we have in this town are ridiculously talented, and we are so fortunate that we've had this support for the drama students and
the inclusion piece.
outstanding
The inclusion
teachers.
piece is big too.
The inclusion piece is huge. And,
So many students were included in that, regardless of their capabilities, and
worked
just looked great.
tirelessly with the rehearsals and the staging and the music. It was outstanding. So I believe that is it for me, and thank you very much. Mr. Barron.
Got nothing. Motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn, that's a good one.
Second.
Second by Mr. Becky. Any discussion on the motion? All in favor, say aye.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you.